Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make pumpkin bars, and this is what it looks like. On the bottom we have a brown sugar shortbread that's buttery crisp. On top of that, finely chopped pecans, and then a creamy smooth pumpkin filling. It's very similar to a pumpkin pie filling. And then if you like, you can top it with a dollop of whipped cream. So the first thing you will need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need a 9 by 13 and then 2-inch side pan. So that's 23 by 33 by 5 centimeters. And then I like to line the pan with foil and then come up the sides and over the tops. If you want, then you can just easily lift the baked bars right out of the pan. And then I'm going to butter my pan. You can just spray it with one of those non-stick sprays. So what I've done is I just melted about maybe a tablespoon, 15 grams of butter. And then with a pastry brush, I'm going to brush the bottom and sides. Okay, looks good. So the first thing you will need to do is to toast your pecans. This is kind of an optional layer. I like to put the brown sugar shortbread and then finely chopped pecans. I think it just adds a little bit of flavor and a little bit of texture to your bars. It's kind of an optional. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. And I do like to toast my pecans. So you will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 75 grams of pecans. Just put them on a baking sheet, put them in the oven for 6 to 8 minutes, just until you start to smell them. Then let them cool, and then you can either just finely chop them on a cutting board, or if you have a food processor, you can just put them in there and process them until they're pretty finely ground like that. Other options would be walnuts, pretty similar in flavor to a pecan, but you could use hazelnuts, almonds, whatever you like. Now, for our brown sugar shortbread, if you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, use a hand mixer, or really you could do this by hand. The first thing you will need is 3/4 of a cup, which is 170 grams of butter. Have your butter at room temperature. For shortbread, you can use, I'm using unsalted butter. I like the flavor, and that way I can control the salt. But if you have a favorite salted butter, by all means, use that. So what I'm going to do is just beat this on low speed just until it's nice and smooth. Okay. As always, when you're making a batter, periodically stop, scrape down the sides and bottom of your bowl. You want to make sure everything gets mixed together. So now, our next ingredient, we need a 1/2 cup, 100 grams of light brown sugar. If you're using a measuring cup, make sure you kind of pat that brown sugar down to get rid of any air pockets. I really like a brown sugar shortbread here because I think the brown sugar complements the pumpkin flavor. If you wanted to, you don't want brown sugar, you just want regular shortbread, you could just use a 1/2 cup, 100 grams of the granulated white sugar. So now, when you're making shortbread, we don't want to get a lot of air into the batter. It's just about mixing the ingredients together. So I'm going to mix this on medium-low speed just until they're mixed together. Okay, that, quick. Okay, so now in a separate bowl, I have 2 cups, which is 260 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour, and I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Now, if you used salted butter, I just leave out that salt, and then I'm just going to stir with my fork, use a whisk. And I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to mix this on low speed. I don't want that flour coming up in my face. And I'm just going to mix it on low speed just until the batter starts to get clumps almost like coarse crumbs. It's not going to be a solid ball. We don't want that. Just kind of coarse crumbs. Okay, we are done. As you can see, I'll just scrape that. So this is what you're looking for. It's not a solid, it's just, you want all the flour moistened. So you could just do it, you know, in a bowl with your fingertips, just work the mixture together. So now I'm just going to just a little on the bottom there. So now I'm just using my fingertips, my fingers, to press this into the bottom. Some people like to use the back of a spoon or the bottom of a glass. Whatever works for you. Just try to, you know, get an even layer. Make sure you get in the corners and press down really firmly. And once you have it, you know, nice and firmly pressed down, kind of run your hand over to try to get it even. So I'm happy with that. So then I'm just going to take tines of a fork and then just lightly, don't prick all the way down to the bottom, just lightly. That'll help prevent it from puffing up during baking. So, looks good. So now, everyone's oven is a little different, as I always say, but I'm going to say 16 to 18 minutes. I do like to rotate the pan front to back halfway through baking, because usually your oven has hot spots, and that kind of, if you rotate your pan, you get more even baking. And what you're looking for is it just turns a nice light brown on top. So I'm going to say 16 to 18 minutes. Okay, so our shortbread is done. Put your pan on a wire rack. As you can see, just very light golden brown on top. Now, as soon as it comes out of the oven, I'm going to put that 3/4 cup, 75 grams of toasted and finely chopped pecans on the top. Sprinkle it. I don't know whether I said, the reason I toast the pecans first is it really brings out their flavor. Same with walnuts. But, you know, some people do prefer to use raw pecans or walnuts. You could do that. So just sprinkle, I'm just using a spoon. Be careful, it's hot. The reason I like to put a layer of the finely chopped pecans is it acts like kind of a barrier between the pumpkin filling and the shortbread. Otherwise, sometimes the filling can be absorbed into the shortbread. So you put a layer of pecans, and not only adds flavor, texture, but kind of creates a barrier. So now, once I put the pecans, I just kind of take a fork or the back of the spoon and just, gently press the pecans into the hot shortbread. And then what I'm going to do, I don't want to make my filling and put it on top of a really hot shortbread, or that will kind of the filling will absorb into the shortbread. So I'm going to let it cool down, maybe about 15 minutes. And then when we come back, we will make our filling. So I did let the shortbread cool down to it's kind of lukewarm, and then about 15 minutes. So now we are going to make the filling. Oh, and by the way, I did just leave my oven turned on to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius. So for the filling, I'm just making it by hand. In a large bowl, I have 3 large eggs. Have your eggs at room temperature. 3 large is about 150 grams. And then I'm just going to use a wire whisk to break them up. Okay, and next I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup, 155 grams of light brown sugar. Again, if you're using your measuring cup, kind of press it down. This recipe, and I'm just going to whisk that in, this recipe is very similar. It's almost the same as the filling I use for my pumpkin pie. But this, you know, making it in bar form is like very convenient, especially if you're, you know, have to take it to a potluck or something like that. You can just cut it into bars, and then people can try not just one dessert, they can have a few desserts. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of pure vanilla extract, just for flavoring. If you don't want a vanilla flavor, you can just leave that out. And then, of course, we need our pumpkin. I'm using one 15-ounce can, that's 425 grams of pure pumpkin puree. No spices added. We're going to add our own spices. I find, you know, you can make your own, but the canned pumpkin is really, it's really good. I don't really notice a difference. But if you want to make your own, just go to the joyofbaking.com website under this recipe, and in the head note I will have instructions how to make your own. You want to use the smaller pumpkin variety, but either way. And one 15-ounce can would be about 2 cups or 425 grams. And then for our spices, I have 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, and I always like just 1/8 teaspoon of ground cloves, and a 1/2 teaspoon of 2 grams of salt. Of course, if you have another mix that you like, more or less of all those ingredients, and by all means, use that. I'm making this by hand because I don't want to overmix. You know, I don't find it's as big of a problem when you're making the pumpkin bars, but when you're doing a pumpkin pie, you can get cracking, and a lot of times that is mixing too much air into your batter. So that's why I prefer to make it by hand. You don't tend to overmix. So we only have one. I'm going to switch over to my spatula here. I'm going to add slowly 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 milliliters, 180 grams of heavy whipping cream, and have it at room temperature. Heavy whipping cream is cream with a 35 to 40% butterfat content. Another way of putting it is if I whipped it, it would hold stiff peaks. And this is going to make it so creamy, smooth, rich tasting. Just wonderful. Okay. So, it wasn't too hard to do. I find these bars are pretty easy, whipped together. They'll last, you know, 3-4 days in the refrigerator. Okay, looks good. Such a beautiful color. A fall color. Okay, and then we're just gonna over the top. And back of a spoon, or I'm just using an offset spatula, just spread it out. Get in those corners. And then what I like to do is just if I shake my pan gently, kind of evens it out. So now, for our baking here, everyone's oven is different, but I'm going to say 30 minutes. Again, rotate your pan front to back about halfway through. What you're looking for, it'll be set around the edges, but there'll still be like a nice shiny sheen on the top of your pumpkin filling. But you know, if you kind of jiggle it, it will be set. So I'm going to say about 30 minutes. Okay, so our pumpkin bars are now done. Put your pan on a wire rack. As you can see, set around the edges, but you can see in the light, there's still a nice sheen on the top. If you could take a knife and go in about maybe an inch or so, 2.5, 3 centimeters, and it should, if you put a knife in, it should come out clean. So what we're going to do now is let these cool down to room temperature. And then when we come back, we will try one. So I let the pumpkin bars cool to room temperature. They're still a little soft. If you wanted to, you could put them into the refrigerator to firm up before you cut them. And actually, you can store them in the fridge probably 3-4 days. And then, I mean, as large, as small as you want to cut them, I'll just... If you want, what I like to do, because there's, you know, a little filling on my knife before I cut, I just use a cloth to wipe it. And that looks like a nice size for a bar, square. Oh, whether you can see the layers there. You have on the bottom that brown sugar shortbread, and then the toasted pecans on top, and then our pumpkin filling. And you know, I typically, because there is heavy cream in the filling, I mean, you can have some whipped cream. Some people like pumpkin pie or pumpkin bars like a little bit of whipped cream. So you could, I just usually have a bowl on the side of whipped cream and let people take some or not. You could put your whipped cream in a piping bag and do a pretty rosette, but I think that looks good. So let's try some. That's really good. I'm a big fan of pumpkin pie. So anything with pumpkin and a crust, I'm there. So you have that brown sugar shortbread. It's buttery, it's crisp, and then a little bit, you know, you can taste those pecans, and it adds a little texture, and then the creamy, smooth pumpkin filling. Very good. Like I said, this is a nice alternative if you don't want to bother doing a pie. Do this. I mean, it's really nice to take or just to have it for your family. So you must try this one. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.